Missouri is technically one state. In practice, it is at least 5 different places that happen to share a border and an accidental boot-shaped appendage in the southeast corner. Drive from Kansas City to the Missouri Bootheel. Drive from St. Louis to the southern Ozarks hollows. Drive from the wine country along the Missouri River bluffs to the edge of the Ozarks plateau, where the pavement ends and the cell signal drops out. The landscape, the culture, the economy, the architecture, the food, the accent, and the specific relationship people have with the land around them all change. These differences occur in ways that most Americans and most Missourians do not fully appreciate until they actually make those drives. The state of Missouri contains, within its single set of borders, a piece of the Mississippi Delta, a stretch of Rhineland transplanted from Germany to the Missouri River bluffs, pockets of persistent Appalachian culture in the deep Ozarks hollows that have not moved on since the 1880s, a corridor of antebellum Virginia along the central Missouri River, and a southeast corner that has more in common with Memphis and Clarksdale than it does with anything north of it. Here's a tour of the parts of Missouri that feel like somewhere else entirely. Subscribe right now. Hit the button and the bell. The Missouri Bootheel feels like the Mississippi Delta. Not metaphorically, but geographically, culturally, and economically. The Bootheel extends into Arkansas and Tennessee because a single landowner successfully lobbied in the 1820s to have his plantation included in Missouri rather than Arkansas when the state border was drawn. His name was John Hardiman Walker. He is buried in Pemiscot County in the boot he created. The result of his lobbying is a rectangular appendage of flat, rich delta farmland, including cotton, rice, and soybeans, and it has more in common culturally and geographically with Memphis than with Springfield. The blues tradition runs deep in the Bootheel. Poverty rates match the Mississippi Delta. The history of sharecropping and agricultural labor displacement matches the Deep South. In January 1939, approximately 1,000 sharecroppers, most of them black, camped along Highway 60 and Highway 61 in near freezing temperatures in one of the first civil rights demonstrations in Missouri's recorded history, protesting the eviction of farm labor by landlords who were capturing federal agricultural subsidies meant to support the workers. The demonstration was dispersed within days. It does not appear in most Missouri history curricula. The Bootheel is Missouri on its Missouri-shaped maps. It is Mississippi on the ground. The Missouri Rhineland feels like Germany, because it was supposed to. A stretch of the Missouri River Valley between St. Louis and Jefferson City, anchored by the towns of Hermann, Rhineland, and Augusta, was settled primarily by German immigrants in the 1830s and the 1840s, who chose the bluffs above the river because the loose-covered hills and warm southern exposures reminded them of the Rhine Valley they had left. They were not making a casual observation. They planted grapes on the hillsides above the river. They built stone churches and brick commercial buildings in styles that would have been unremarkable in central Germany and that appeared to belong to a different continent on a Missouri ridge. Hermann, Missouri has been producing wine since 1843 and is now home to more than a dozen wineries. The German-language newspaper published there, the Hermanner Volksblatt, ran continuously until 1933. The winemaking traditions survived Prohibition through what local histories describe as creative interpretation of what constituted legal grape products. It is a very German solution to an American problem. When you stand in Hermann's commercial district today, you are standing in a piece of the Rhine Valley that was picked up and set down on a Missouri River bluff by people who missed home and had the stubbornness to recreate it. The wine is real, the architecture is real. Most Missouri tourists who stop for a wine tasting have no idea how deliberate the whole thing was. Hit the like button. It tells the algorithm this story matters. The deep Ozark. Hollows feel like the 1880s, not everywhere. Not for long if you have cell service, but in the interior in Shannon County, in Ozark County, in Oregon County, and in the parts of Douglas County where the signal drops out and the road change from asphalt to gravel to something that a modern vehicle is being optimistic about. There are communities that were functionally isolated from the rest of America until paved roads arrived in the 1930s and the 1940s. In some cases, Those roads arrived even later than that. The sheriff of Ozark County still used a horse in 1937 because it was faster than a car on the existing roads. The mail was delivered on horseback in parts of the region into the 1950s. The first paved road in Stone County, Arkansas, which shares the Ozarks culture without the Missouri name, did not arrive until 1957. The isolation produced a culture that preserved things other parts of America had long moved past. Folk medicine traditions remained, while the rest of the country replaced them with hospitals and pharmacies. Oral history and folk ballad traditions were carried from the British Isles in the early 1800s, and they were maintained in Ozarks hollows long after they had disappeared from the places they came from. Musicologists documented songs in the 1940s Ozarks that had vanished from England by the Victorian era. A largely cashless trading economy of ginseng, moonshine, furs, and labor persisted in some communities into the 1940s, not by ideological choice, but because the cash economy simply had not fully arrived yet. In 1973, a group of high school students in Lebanon, Missouri, started running around the Ozarks with tape recorders. Their English teacher had given them an assignment to document traditional Ozark culture. Over 10 years, they conducted 476 recorded interviews, and they documented what they already understood at 17 years old was leaving. They were right. Most of what they recorded is gone from living practice. The landscape that produced it is still there. The hollows are still deep enough that the outside world arrives slowly. The hills have not changed. Little Dixie feels like antebellum Virginia. Central Missouri, between Columbia and Hannibal along the Missouri River, was settled heavily by slaveholders from Kentucky and Virginia who brought their cultural and agricultural practices with them. The region was called Little Dixie before the Civil War, and the name stuck through everything that came after. The Greek Revival architecture of the older plantation houses is indistinguishable from what you would find in the Virginia Tidewater. The tobacco culture that shaped the agricultural economy left physical traces that are still visible in the landscape. Mark Twain grew up in Hannibal, watching slave auctions on the courthouse steps. That history has been minimized in Twain-related tourism for over a century, which prefers to focus on the whitewashed fence, the cave, and the river adventures. The auction block was on the same street. The Civil War hit Little Dixie with a brutality that matched anything in the formal battleground states. The guerrilla war that Quantrill's Raiders and Bloody Bill Anderson waged across these counties was more personal and more savage than the formal military engagements that made it into the national history books. Quantrill's raid on Lawrence, Kansas, which originated in Missouri planning, killed approximately 150 civilians. It is the kind of Civil War chapter that Missouri schools have historically been least eager to teach, which is a pattern the state applies fairly consistently to the most uncomfortable parts of its history. Branson feels like a place that happened somewhere else. Branson draws more annual visitors than Yellowstone National Park. A town of approximately 12,000 permanent residents in the Ozarks Hills processes millions of tourists per year through dinner theaters, live music venues, a concentration of indoor water parks that defies reasonable estimation, and enough outlet retail to supply a medium-sized metropolitan area. The entertainment strip on Highway 76 is one of the most concentrated examples of commercial tourism infrastructure anywhere in the American interior. The original Ozarks community that the Taney County hills contained before the entertainment economy arrived is still there, in the hills behind the theaters, in the families who have lived in the valley since before there was Highway 76, in the outdoor drama that has been running since 1960, based on a 1907 novel about the actual Ozarks families who lived where the parking lots are now. The Shepherd of the Hills outdoor drama features fictionalized versions of real people. Some of their descendants watch their ancestors performed on stage every summer season. Whether they experience this as tribute or something more complicated depends on the family and the evening. The Branson economy began on a boat dock on Lake Taneycomo in 1959, when 4 brothers from Taney County started singing for whoever showed up. Every theater on the strip exists because of that boat dock. The families who built Branson from a fishing village into a national tourism destination are real Ozarkers. The Branson that emerged is genuinely theirs. It is also a place that the Ozarks they came from would not recognize. There is one more country inside Missouri that does not get described as a country because it does not look like one from the outside. The new Madrid seismic zone runs beneath the Bootheel and into the surrounding counties, beneath the same flat delta farmland, the same rich alluvial soil, the same cotton and rice and soybean fields that define the region's agricultural identity. In 1811 and 1812, the zone produced a series of earthquakes estimated at magnitude 7.5 to 8.8, the largest in American history. The Mississippi River ran backward for a period. Church bells rang in Boston. A forest the size of a city sank beneath the surface in Tennessee, creating Reelfoot Lake, where the drowned tree trunks are still visible underwater today. Geologists who study the zone say a comparable earthquake now would cause catastrophic damage across 31 states. The soft alluvial soil of the Bootheel, the same soil that makes the farmland so extraordinarily productive, amplifies seismic waves in ways that bedrock does not. Buildings on that soil during a major New Madrid event would experience shaking significantly more severe than buildings on more solid geological foundations at the same distance from the epicenter. Emergency management professionals who have modeled a major event note that the Bootheel's geographic isolation, aging housing stock, and limited transportation infrastructure would make it one of the most difficult regions in Missouri to reach with response in the aftermath. None of this is classified. The USGS publishes seismic hazard maps showing exactly how the risk is distributed. The soft soil amplification factor is documented in the engineering literature. The modeling is available from Missouri's State Emergency Management Agency. What is not readily available is a comprehensive public conversation in the Bootheel about what it means to live above a fault system that produced the largest earthquakes in American history. A conversation most residents have not been prompted to have because the next earthquake is not on any predictable schedule, and daily life does not accommodate geological timescales. The agricultural corporations farming large Bootheel parcels have insurance actuaries who have calculated this risk and priced it accordingly. Families farming land they own outright have whatever information they have accumulated on their own. The gap between those two information environments is one of the quieter inequities built into the Bootheel's landscape. Missouri's 5 different countries each have their own version of this gap between what is knowable about the land and what the people living on it have been told. In the Rhineland, it is the deliberateness of the cultural transplant that most visitors miss. In Little Dixie, it is the Civil War chapters the history books abbreviated. In the Ozarks hollows, it is the depth and specificity of what was lost when the roads came and the cash economy arrived, and when the culture that the Bittersweet Project teenagers ran around trying to document finally became mostly historical record rather than living practice. In the Bootheel, it is the fault beneath the farmland, the sharecropper demonstration that happened on the highways in January 1939, and the gap between what the land produces and what the people working it have historically received from that production. The borders of Missouri contain all of this simultaneously. The state map does not distinguish between them. Jefferson City makes policy for all of them at once, without always appearing to fully grasp how different each one is from the others it is governing. That is the Missouri that exists underneath the Missouri on the map. It is worth knowing about before you describe the state as simply the show me state and move on. These 5 different countries of Missouri share more than a border. They share a state government in Jefferson City that makes decisions about taxation, land policy, water policy, agricultural regulation, and infrastructure spending that affect all 5 simultaneously, while those 5 places consistently have competing interests. The Bootheel's agricultural corporations in the Ozarks hollow communities, and the German wine country families, and the Branson entertainment corridor all have different relationships to the land, different uses for the water, and different relationships to the state government that nominally represents all of them. The political compromises that result from representing all of these different places in a single legislature are visible in the laws that get passed. The 2013 foreign land ownership change that benefited an industrial agricultural operation in northern Missouri was opposed by Ozarkers who understood what it meant for their hills. The 2023 river pollution bill that agricultural interests supported was opposed by the conservation communities who float the rivers that runoff affects. The 2025 water export restriction law that protected Ozarks water was popular in the Ozarks and less obviously popular in the Delta counties, where water use politics run differently. 5 different countries, 1 state. The negotiations between them are happening constantly in a building in Jefferson City that most residents of all 5 countries rarely think about until the results arrive on their land, in their water, or on their tax bills. Drive all of it if you have the time. You do not need a passport, just a willingness to drive and to notice that the landscape you are driving through is trying to tell you something about who built it and why. Subscribe if you have not. Hit the bell. Drop a comment. Which part of Missouri felt most different when you drove through it? Because the state that looks uniform on the map is about as uniform as the terrain below the Ozarks Plateau. Thank you for watching. The truth does not shout. It waits for you to look closer.